Well, thank you all for coming. It's I guess Saturday afternoon for most of you over there. It's Saturday evening here. Um, I see a lot of folks I recognize and some I don't. So thank you all for joining. I do indeed live in France, and so I'm talking to you tonight from about 90 minutes west of Montpellier. So between sort of halfway between Toulouse and Montpellier. And I am a photographer of female nudes. I've been doing it for about 12 years. I have a number of books out and in a number of anthologies, and I have two books coming out in the fall. So I have the second edition of my Paris book coming out, which came out originally in 2013. And I have a brand new book called Polaroids coming out at the same time. And that will consist of scans of type 55 positives from a Polaroid 110 converted to with a 4x5 back. And I'm actually, I have a workshop here in France we're doing in a couple of days. And then right after that, literally right after that, we're getting in the car and driving up to Switzerland for a photo festival where I'm showing some work, and then on to Berlin to put the finishing touches on these two books. So it's very exciting. My publisher is a sort of mad genius, and I love working with him. This will be my fourth book with him. And I'm delighted to chat with you all and, answer any questions you have, and just say hello to the old homeland.
Do we want to do the video?
Sure. Are you going to show it on your end, Michael?
Yeah, I'll do
okay.
it.
Okay.
Or not.
Should I try and pull it up on my end?
Yeah, because I'm having an issue here for some reason.
Okay, let me see if I can indeed do this. Well, I don't really know how to do that. You know what I could do is I could share screen and I could flip through a PDF of the Polaroids book real fast. Should I do that?
Let's do that.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Okay. Oh, whoops. It wants me to quit and reopen. I don't know if that's a good idea. Well, let's see if it'll let me do this. Okay, so is that working?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a sort of beginning PDF of the Polaroids book. It's about 100 pages, I think. So I'll just kind of flip through it. We're still working on sequencing and the introduction, but I think this will give you, are you seeing that, or is it being blocked by, is that okay?
It's working fine for me.
Okay, good. Okay. Sorry, everyone. We're very low tech here in remote France. I mean, we are really rural out here, so internet's a problem and so forth. So, but I'll go through these. So this work came about. I started shooting with this camera, the converted 110, in probably about 2007. And I had had no interest at all in large format photography because my background was really photojournalism. And I had a friend show up at my door one day with this camera as a gift. And he was convinced that I would do wonderful photographs with this camera. And I didn't even know how to open it, let alone put any film through it. And even back then, so I was really shooting most of these around probably 2010 to 12 and on in there. And, you know, the Polaroid Type 55 film was expired even then and very, very difficult to come by. But, you know, I sort of kept shooting what I could get my hands on.
Renee, you might give us just a little bit more time to look.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Sorry. Do you want me to go back several or?
No, I think from here, but, you know, it'd be nice to be able to look at them a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have about a 4 or 5 second lag on the video, but yeah. And you know what, I actually, Michael, I could do this as well with the Paris book because I do have the PDF of the Paris book. So I only shot a few Polaroids in Paris, but there are a few in the book. But most of these were in the States. So most of these were in and around LA, a lot just in the place I lived in Laurel Canyon for many, many years, up and down the California coast. Palm Springs, Joshua Tree. Oh, actually some from Italy, okay. So that's what it looks like at this point. The publisher has in mind that he's going to do this as a sort of Japanese style book, a open spine, as Douglas so succinctly asked, is it a lay flat? And I don't know, I'm going to ask when we get to Berlin. And hopefully it will be. But the publisher, Alex Schultz in Berlin at Galerie Vivet, does a marvelous job. He published a huge volume of Jock Sturgis's work a few years ago. This is my 4th book with him. And he's got just all sorts of really, really interesting ideas. He's an architect by trade, and so he approaches all of these things as a sort of giant puzzle. And he, in addition to the books, he does all sorts of other things. So for my Paris book, he created a perfume and a snow globe and lingerie and, you know, just we couldn't really get a hold of him for the last month when the Paris book was in production because he was busy crafting the perfume. So interesting ideas. And it's always just such a pleasure to work with, such a creative team. And his printer is in Leipzig and does just a marvelous job. So I'm looking forward to going back there. The only other time I'd been in Berlin was when we were laying out the Paris book in 2013, late 2012, early 2013. And I was still living in LA at the time. So between the jet lag and, working nonstop on the book, I didn't see much of Berlin. But since we'll be starting out on this trip from this side of the pond, we won't be jet lagged when we get there. So
I did notice that the text was not English. Are you planning on including an English version in the text?
Douglas, that was just a placeholder. It was one of those Loris Ipsum whatevers.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if it's Latin or what that is. It will have an English text. And we just, over the last 2 days, got the draft introduction from a really wonderful French painter that Greeking text used by designers. Thank you, Lou. Yeah, exactly that. We just got the draft introduction from this wonderful painter who lives actually not far from me down the road here in Montpellier. And I fell in love with him, his work, his writing, when I went to an opening of his exhibit in June. And we really hit it off. And, I thought, well, this would be a really different little way to handle this, take it out of the realm of photography, put it in the hands of a Frenchman, of a painter. And it was really lovely. In reading his own writing about his work, he had certain themes that I thought were just really wonderful. So, getting to work with him on this was a really lovely experience. And I asked him about a week and a half ago, and I didn't even know that I'd gotten a yes. And then the next thing I knew, I got a text. And it's marvelous, and it's in French and English, but we'll put the English version in the book.
What will the text say?
What will the text say? Well, it's really interesting because he does a marvelous job sort of talking about the participation of the viewer and other things, and it's a very filmic sort of look. I excerpted one small bit of it on my Instagram the other day. But the reason that I wanted him to write the introduction was he had a line talking about his own work that I thought it just totally changed the way that I look at my work and the way that I look at the utility of these, sorts of things that we do as artists. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't the exact quote, but he said, desire needs context. And I thought that was just so brilliant because that's exactly what we're doing. It's exactly what I'm doing and why it's important to me, because I didn't have context for these things, back in the day. And so that one sentence just totally changed the way that I looked at my work. And the sentence was a little bit longer than that, but that was more or less the takeaway. That's the abbreviation of it. And the idea that desire needs context, I think his full quote was something like, or it's not viable or livable. And the fact that I had no context for my desires when I was, growing up, when I was coming of age, when I was shooting even, although I started shooting in the 80s as a photojournalist, then I was a lawyer for a long time, and then I came back to photography doing what I'm doing now. But that concept really was just sort of revolutionary to me, just really revolutionized the way that I was thinking about these things.
So,
And I'm
no,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, so his introduction provides the context, is that what you're saying?
No, his introduction is wrapped around themes like that. So his introduction basically talks about the idea that the things that are important to you need context. So your desires need a context. In other words, so many of us did not see ourselves in the dominant media of the time as we were growing up. So many of us didn't see our relationships mirrored in, there was no context for who we were, what we were feeling. And so that's basically what I took from that sentence of his. And so it's just a concept that sort of really spun me around the way that I look at my own work. And he was kind and generous enough to offer up the introduction for the book. It was a win-win because I got it in French and in English at the same time. And this will also help with our nationalization citizenship applications in 2 years, because it helps to be integrated into the French art scene. And so to have a Frenchman write this, it's sort of a double whammy that way. But he writes more along those lines. And I could probably pull up and read some of it, if folks were interested in that. But I'm still trying to sort of wrap my mind around it and digest it, because it was incredibly kind and generous for him to do it in the first place. And what he wrote is just so, I'm so humbled and moved, and it's really lovely, because in my previous books, I have also been extremely lucky with the folks that have written introductions. And for one book, I had Douglas and Francoise Kirkland, who wrote a wonderful introduction. My first book with Alex was Jock Sturgis wrote the introduction. Excuse me, the introduction to my Paris book, Professor John Wood wrote the introduction. It was a wonderful introduction. It was sort of a master class on erotic art. And sadly, John, not long after he wrote that, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about a year or so later. Oh, yes. And then there's that book. Douglas just held up my very first book, which was a photojournalism book from the 1980s. And
I was going to say that's your first book.
that is indeed my first book. Yeah. So my first book of photojournalism came out in 1986, and it was reissued actually in 2010, and which was very exciting and very unexpected. It happened sort of in the middle of while I was doing all of this very, very different work. So. And Douglas was kind enough to include that book, as I think it was one of the 10 most overlooked books in the last 25 years, or 25 books in the last 10 years, something like overlooked, but it was overlooked.
By the way, I also, am I on? Okay, yeah, I am. Okay, so I actually have been thinking it would be really wonderful, because of where you are now and the context of where you now live, of having the French, if you can figure a way to do both those languages in there.
In
Polaroids.
The new book?
Yeah.
In Polaroids?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, it's complicated because the introduction came in at about twice about twice the number of words that I was allotted. So we're still working on the English portion of the program, and we'll use the French in a lot of the local media and such. But the publisher is German, And so, yeah, unless we do a sort of a French version or a French publisher, well, it'll stay in English for this point. But having the French text is really, really lovely and really helpful.
Well, since English words are generally half the length of German words, you should be okay.
When I see the publisher in Berlin, I'll ask him about that. It's like, you were thinking really 600 words in German, right?
Right.
That's an excellent point.
Renee, this is Dan Katz. I'm only recently become familiar with your work, which I love, but I have a question because of the images I just saw. So I'll say both as a photographer and as a viewer of nude photography, when you see photos that are either erotic or sexually explicit, does it make any difference to you whether or not the photographer is a man or a woman?
It makes a difference to me if the photograph is good or not. It doesn't matter to me if it's a male or female photographer. I think men are capable of taking fantastic photographs of women. I think women are capable of taking really terrible photographs of women, and vice versa. And we actually, my wife and I, we started a photo festival here in France to address that exact issue. It's called Photo de Femme. And we were just starting it when COVID hit, but we did one exhibit at a beautiful chateau in sort of central France. And then we were going to do a second show and we couldn't. But the whole premise of our festival is that we wanted to start really putting out empowering, authentic images of women where they felt really represented. And obviously you can't look at my work and think that I have any, issue with erotic photography, whether it's done by a woman, a man, non-binary person. And, for me, the issue is if the woman in the image or models in the image feel that their authentic selves are being represented, that they are, they have agency. I say this in every interview because I'm asked, this all the time, but my favorite photograph ever of a woman was taken by a man. And it was taken by the French photographer named Edward Bouba, probably from the 1940s. The image is called Lela. And after that photograph, I don't know why anybody bothered photographing women ever again, because that one image to me says more about longing and emotions and loss and love and intelligence. And so I very, very strongly believe that men can take absolutely marvelous photographs of women, erotic, non-erotic, and I think, the problem that we've gotten into over the past is that that's all that's been seen. And so, this goes back to my mind-blowing love affair with this sentence that Gregory Forstner wrote for his work and added into my introduction, that desire needs context. And, if women are seeing themselves represented in their fully, explosively erotic selves, that to me is all that matters. If they feel empowered by the image and that their participation was valuable that way, then I'm all for it. And I've been called a pornographer. I have no compunction about that. Don't care. And I don't care if men are doing those images of women. I think it's, to me, it's entirely about how the women in the photographs feel about them.
Can you be explicit? Let's see. Can you be explicit about your context? Is it in the photo or is it around the photo? How does it relate to concept?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So you've mentioned context in the context of that sentence, but you really haven't until just now, a moment ago, mentioned explicitly what your context is, or what are you thinking about context?
Okay.
Does it relate to concept that you have?
It's not so much concept as representation and emotion. To me, the context is the spectrum of women and women's sexuality and women's desires is so vast. And if you as a woman don't have context telling you that that's okay, you think that it's not. And that to me is the context that I'm interested in. And the desire, need, and context is that for so long, so many women, especially queer women, were isolated in terms of acknowledging, society didn't acknowledge their desires as worthy. It was either erased, exploited, but rarely empowered. And so that's the context that I'm talking about, is that giving every woman and indeed every person, the ability to see that their desire is valid, that it has context, because, it's only recently that we're now seeing, so many different things and a diversity of views about how women should be depicted, how, people all along the spectrum should be depicted. And, we're now participating in that for the first time. We've been told for decades in visual media and representation, how we are supposed to present, how we are supposed to feel, the narrow range of desires we're allowed to have. And so that's the context to me. That's why that sentence is so important to me.
You would say then that your context is within the image itself then, to the pressing outward towards perhaps a vacancy in a way?
Yeah, and it's not even just an image or the image. It's the ability to do these images. So, the fact that, I was able to photograph these women in ways they wanted to be photographed, that was taking their desires and giving it context. And because I gave them context, it gave myself context, and it gave, a woman in Kansas that might never have thought she could do such a thing to such a person, to herself, that's the context. I'll give you an example. Okay. At some point, I'll try and pull up the PDF from the Paris book. But in the Paris book, my Paris book, there's an image. Let's see if I can find it. I might be able to find it. I'll wait and I'll describe it first. There's one image in the Paris book where I'm shooting down from a roof, a Parisian rooftop, through a Velux, through a skylight. And there's a woman on the bed with ropes tied up. The context of that photograph is that a bunch of us were out the night before at a burlesque show. And this model just sort of casually threw into the conversation something about ropes. Ha ha ha, ropes, blah, 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 ropes. And it didn't mean much to me at the time, but I woke up the next morning and I realized she was telling me that's how she wanted to be photographed. That was her desire. That was her thing. And so I called her up that morning and I said, go get your rope or whatever it is and come over at 3:00 and we'll do some photographs. Well, it turns out that, yes, indeed, that was her thing. And she had never had the context for that. She had taught herself online how to tie herself up, but had never bothered, not bothered, but had never felt comfortable sharing that was her desire to her husband, her lover, anyone. So the first time that she really told anyone about that was when we were doing those photographs. She's a very good friend. She became, all of the models in the Paris book became very good friends. So when she showed up a few years later in the south of France with a bunch of other model friends to shoot one week, everyone knows everybody's context now, the context of their desires. So when this model showed up, they said, oh, so-and-so, it's so great to see you. Let's tie you to a post. So, that's the context that I'm talking about. The license to be able to be who you are, because you see a linear, spectrum of images, and you can slot yourself anywhere on that spectrum. Linear is probably a bad description of it, but the whole giving context to desire idea for me is that as long as someone is not harming someone else, obviously, their self-expression needs to be honored. And if people don't see that reflected in photography and advertising, and so they have no context for that, so they think it's bad. They think it's unacceptable, and so that's sort of another explainer of the way that I feel about that.
Very good. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Sorry, I didn't quite.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So do you have any, or have you done any male subjects, photographed any male subjects? And if not, are you planning?
I have, and I do that actually really as a commercial thing. So I make myself available for private commissions.
Okay.
But it's not really the work that I share. It's much more of a personal thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Should I try and see if I can find that image?
Well, sure.
Let's see here. And Michael, of course, if you've had any more success on that.
Yeah, regretfully, Renee, my copy of that book is in my downstairs library, so I can't quite get it as quickly as I did the last one.
Yeah, no. But I was wondering if Michael was able to pull up the. Oh, you know what? Let's do this. I have the PDF for the Paris book. So why don't we just kind of go through that if that's okay?
Okay. Then we'll try the video again.
Okay. So are folks seeing this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is not in Greek. This is actually John Wood's actual introduction to the book. So no Loris Ipsum whatever.
Are we looking at the second edition, or is this the first?
This is the first edition. Yeah, this is the first edition. So the second edition, some of these photographs will be swapped out for other photographs. For instance, this image here on the left will not be in the new edition. So we've got about 10 to maybe 11 or a dozen new images coming out in this book. Including, remind me to go back to this story, but one of Helmut Newton's muses that I photographed, and we didn't include it in the first version, but it's going to be in the second. And that's also sort of a nod to the fact that I will be exhibiting alongside work from the Newton Foundation in October in Barcelona. So if any of you folks happen to be passing through Barcelona in October,
Again, slow down just a little bit so we can.
Sure.
Yeah.
And why did you choose to remove and replace certain images?
It's always an incredibly difficult thing choosing what stays and what goes. And, you always second guess those choices. And so there are some images that I felt were really lovely that we just didn't have a space for. And, I thought and actually Alex, the publisher, suggested it. So, I went back and I looked at all my old shoots from Paris and picked about a dozen images that I think they're a little more, I think they add a little more frivolity and a little more joy. At least I hope they do. Plus, it was a huge mistake not to include the photograph of Sylvia Goebel, the Helmut's muse. And that was a silly decision on my part. So we're fixing that.
So one question, if you back up just one page, so this one right here. So and you had one on the Pont des Arts also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have public nudity basically. And have you had any problem with that?
I've had a few, but as you'll notice, this is late at night. The Pont des Arts was at sunrise. I am not one of those, people that needs to sort of shove this in people's faces. I'm not trying to make a statement that, everyone should run around nude in public. I'm trying to blend a certain feeling that women have in Paris and why they have that feeling. So Paris as a model herself is an important concept.
Mm-hmm.
But I never tried to offend people, and I never tried to sort of put it in people's faces. So I, shoot very fast, very discreetly. And there was that one time on the Bir Hakeim Bridge when an entire van of gendarmes pulled up while I was shooting, and that was interesting. But my model, who was the model on the cover of the book, just laid into them. The women and the police women in the van were laughing hysterically, but the men apparently felt they had to, make a big deal. But I was mortified, but my cover model was just, back in their face. It's art. And it's like, well, let's see how the photos turn out before we call it art. But still, so yeah, I try to be discreet, but
So I'm sorry. You say so you shoot fast. Now I know that some people, have like if they're shooting, a place like this, they would have lookouts, for lack of a better word, and tell you, okay, the police are coming or something like that, and then the model would cover up. I mean, did you have to do anything like that, or?
It probably would have been extremely smart if I had. But I didn't, because usually it was just me and the model or models.
Okay.
And invariably it would be the model, as it was on the Bir Hakeim Bridge, it would be the model that would spot the gendarmes coming, because I was looking through the camera and I was really focused. But I don't have a retinue of an entourage of people. I don't have assistants. I don't have lights. I don't have, makeup people. I have a model, and we wander around looking for, a beautiful light, basically. Lookouts would have been helpful, but I only really got into trouble once, and it was my own fault. It was a language barrier. My French was a lot worse than it is now. It's not great now, but it was worse then. And I had taken a model to the ice skating rink in front of the Hotel de Ville. And I had been there the night before and it was empty, but it was raining. So when I took her back the next night, I thought, oh, nobody really uses it. This will be great. Well, it was full of families and kids. And my model was in basically a parka that was a zip, a zip parka. And she had a kind of sheer shirt underneath. And when I saw that there were so many people there, I said, you know what, let's just skate. Or you skate. I'm going to stand here and wobble around on the side for a bit, but don't open your jacket. Let's forego this. We'll shoot something else somewhere else. But we're here on skate, so you skate, and she didn't understand what I was saying at all. Oh. So every time she circled on the ice, she unzipped, and I was just absolutely mortified. Nobody saw a thing. But there I was with my Canon 5D. And so Hotel de Ville security came up to me and said, you're a professional camera. You're a professional photographer because of this camera. You don't have a license to shoot here. It is copyrighted. The buildings in Paris are essentially copyrighted, especially the way they're lit at night. So give us your card. We're going to erase your card. And they did erase the card, but I was lucky enough to get the images back later that night, and through whatever software magic. But that was the one time that I really had a problem, and it was my own fault, because I would probably have a better chance of telling her to keep her jacket closed this time.
You mentioned that you use models. Are they professional models? Do you worry about indirect representation?
No, for the most part, they're not. Many of them are friends. Some are women that we just sort of see on the street, or if I'm shooting with a bunch of women in a place and they see someone that they think is just gorgeous, and they'll run up to me in a supermarket. This has happened, and said, "Oh, go over to the bread aisle. She's got to come, back to the place and shoot with us." So this is the model. Although that's not the photograph that I was talking about, but we'll get to that. At least I don't think I've passed it.
Well, I could also speak to the fact that Renee and I had a booth together up in Santa Monica, and it was just beside me. Every drop dead gorgeous girl that would walk up would ask Renee if she could model for her. It was like, how, but it's like, I'd look at her and she look at me and she kind of like, wow.
Yeah, it does. It does kind of work that way. And again, that's because of how invested I am in giving their desire context. It's very important to me that I feel like I'm not imposing what I want to see. I don't tell them what to do. I don't tell them what to wear. I don't tell them how to act. I want to hear what they have to say and how they want to present themselves, because, the fact that so many of these women have shared the context of their desires with me, has really it just totally helped me situate my own. It's like, okay, if this one is on that end of the spectrum, this one's over there, this one's up there, where I slot into all this is just perfectly fine. We're all perfectly fine. And that can be a revolutionary understanding for a woman. We took this photo out on the left and replaced it with a sort of more loose version of these two women, a much more playful image of those two women.
Slow down again just a little bit. It just go by so fast we don't have a chance to really observe what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry about that. I was looking for the one particular image, and yeah. As I kind of talk and think, I realize I may have already gone past something I wanted to talk about, but this image at the top of Notre Dame is a very good example. It would have been great to shoot some kind of nude or topless. There was no way that was happening, and that was fine. I wasn't going to push it. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was just going to say, and I love this image. So it's.
I was there 30 years ago, at least, and they didn't have that cage up there.
I know. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I was going back. I was hoping to go back the same year that the church burned down. So.
Out of curiosity, do your models, do you compensate them in any way for when you sell a book or you sell a print, or are they just thrilled to get copies of the pictures?
Yeah, going in, we set up an arrangement, and it's I give them prints, or back in the day I gave them CDs or digital files. For instance, I'm going up to Berlin, and I'm going to shoot with a model in here that I've shot quite a bit. And she wanted me to bring certain prints of a certain size. I'd given her prints before, so that's usually the exchange that we do.
Thank you.
Sure. Has everyone been to Paris? Are these scenes ringing a bell? Café de Flore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Shakespeare and Company, of course. That's I've got to get working on that, because that's the bucket list for where I want to do a signing when the second edition comes out.
Yep. Absolutely.
I should know which page this image is on, because I talk about it all the time, in again, as part of this discussion of context. This image on the right, I really got lucky with one of my sort of Airbnbs. When I decided to, oh, here comes the image. When I decided to go up on the roof and realize that there was this amazing view of the Eiffel Tower. So not only did I shoot the cover up there, not only did I shoot this and a lot of images up there, I had one hell of a party up there. With probably about 30 of the models.
And nobody fell off?
I lost a lens cap that way. that was the champagne speaking. So this is the image that I was referring to, this one on the left. And, this woman has like Audrey Hepburn cheekbones, just absolutely stunning, and is French to boot, and had never had the context to express her desire. And this was it. So, those are the kinds of things that I'm referencing. There was a photograph a little while ago that was, again, looking down to a number of these models from that roof. So this image is coming out. And none of them are coming out necessarily because I don't like them as images. It's just, we wanted to give room to some others.
Well, from my perspective, it also establishes the fact that the book is definitely a new edition.
Yeah, and that was part of it. And it's a different format. It's going to be a smaller format, hardbound book.
Can you say a little bit about the difference in sizes?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking, Lou. I can't really, they were the decisions of the book designer. Mm-hmm. And, there are some that I would do differently. And I think in the second edition, they actually will be a uniform size. I had great faith in the, it's sort of, how do you know what you don't know sort of thing. And I will be the first one to admit that book design is not my strength. There's that very humorous graphic that always goes around with the frog with the outstretched hand. Graphic design is my passion. And that's kind of how I feel about book design. So I thought it was interesting. It didn't bother me.
But also in 2012, that was somewhat of a popular genre of how to do a layout. So design-wise, those types of odd shapes and unusual placements was kind of, I wouldn't say common in that time, but forward-thinking designers were starting to play with the idea of moving images around to make it more dynamic.
Mm. Yeah, and Douglas, you would know. I was along for the ride. There were so many things like this. I was along for the ride. The perfume, my preference was Renee Jacobs Paris No. 3, but other people preferred 5. It was just a wild ride, all of it. So this is the model for whom I'll be shooting brand new Polaroids for the collector's edition of the Polaroids book. One of the models I'll be photographing in Berlin. So I've photographed her a ton all over the place, LA, Italy, Paris. The top.
It's the same model on both pages?
Yeah.
Okay.
Top of the Duomo. So she especially wanted the shot from the top of the Duomo in Milan, which ran in Playboy Italy a few years ago. So we'll be, actually, I just today made some brand new prints to bring up to her.
As
Is
far
she
as I
the-
as far as I can tell, these are all beautiful women, attractive women. Do you feel that's how do you feel about that?
Um,
I mean, I think about it in terms of criticism of advertising, that perhaps we see a lot of thin women in advertising. I mean, this is wonderful to look at. Um, do you feel that it is, you're trying to be representational, it's sufficient?
I'm not trying to be representational.
Okay.
Yeah, the concept really that doesn't move me. I was looking for something in my work. I was looking for something very specific, and that was giving my own desires context.
Okay.
And the only way that I could do that is by having these women share theirs with me.
Okay.
And it was very, as Douglas, described, it's a pretty self-selecting group. They come up to me, they find me, they want to shoot, and they want to shoot because they know that I'll listen to what they have to say, because I'm fascinated by what they have to say.
Okay.
And so, this was my cover model. She was, was absolutely stunning. She was in her mid 40s when we did the cover. I photographed women into their 60s, and so I'm not trying to be representational.
No, I'm just asking about that to say that you are, and Douglas's comment is what generated that idea. So I was the attraction of being photographed is strong.
Yeah, and it's I think it's more than the attraction of being photographed. It's the attraction of being heard.
Yes, I love it. Very good.
Yeah, and
Before you go on, but go ahead and finish your sentence. I want to ask you about this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Because I know it's sort of a almost simplistic, and I kind of keep saying the same concept, but it really is what it boils down to for me, is that I didn't see myself represented in images when I was young and coming out and grappling with things, and and then I got back into shooting and discovered all of these women who are bold and expressive and fearless. And, this one wants to walk nude down the Champs-Elysees. That one would never, show her neck in public, but she has, she wants to be tied up, or, whatever it is.
What?
Let me ask a question here.
Okay.
I'm curious in how you find the settings that you do. For example, the one on the left, you're obviously in a hotel or on a rooftop or something like that. So how do you find these? Do people recommend places, and you make notes on these things, or how do you find these? And then how do you get permission to?
Well, that's the flip side of hanging out with all these stunning women. They know people that have a lot of really nice places.
Okay, that's why. Oh, am I on? Okay, that's what I want to ask. I recognize the apartment on the right, Pierre Bissard. That's his.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
As soon as I saw that with the stack of books, I thought that's Pierre. And his dining room, living room. It's like
right on I think it's 11 or 21 Rue de Rivoli or whatever it is.
21.
Yeah. And the one on the left is Place de Vosges and Palais Royal, rather, Palais Royal. And the woman in the photograph on the bench knew the guy that has the apartment. So we photographed quite a number of images there one night, and I photographed her there on several occasions. And yeah.
You also did a book with Pierre, right?
I did. Okay. I did a zine with Pierre in 2014. And that's the one that Douglas and Francoise Kirkland wrote the introduction.
And I didn't get a copy. Bummer.
Oh, and I think it's gone.
How is Douglas doing? Last time I saw him, he seemed to be frail.
I think he's a little frail, but I last saw him in Paris at Paris Photo, so the year before last, the last time they ran it, and they're still traveling. He's still shooting. I think they're in Hawaii right now. Yeah, I mean, Douglas, I think he just had his 86th birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's something really interesting about what you were saying about really you're giving agency to these women to present themselves in the way that they want to be seen. Like, I think there's a thing that happens with a lot of photographers where there's this really friction between the way the person in front of the camera wants to be seen and the way that the photographer sees them. And so I think that attraction that happens is that people recognize that you're like a megaphone for them. And I think that that's not the case with a lot of photographers.
Well, and that's gotten me into quite a bit of trouble. I've had a publisher walked away from this book. I had one very well-known male photographer, as soon as my work started getting this erotic, walk away from it. And I'm spinning through this because I'm looking for another specific photograph to talk about exactly that issue. And I can never find them when I want them. Oh, there it is. So it's a little small. It's hard to see. I don't know if I can actually blow this up. Oh, no, I can't. Okay, let's not do that. Don't press buttons. You don't know what they do. Everybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like when I was, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Stop pressing buttons. So this image on the left, this woman is wearing a leather get-up something. She's wearing ballet, the toe things. I don't even know what they're called. She's smoking a cigarette. She's on the roof. This photograph, there's something about this woman that made the original publisher who committed to this book made him walk away. Made another male photographer comment to me, you have all these photographs of these women where their chins are up, and I find that very arrogant. So I didn't tell her to look like this. I didn't tell her, let's go onto the roof and smoke your cigarette and wear this outfit. I didn't even know that things like this existed. So this was her. This is what she wanted to say. This is what she owns. This is how she wanted to present. And, fantastic. All, like I said, all across the spectrum, somebody wants to present like this. It means that, where my small slice of, the way that I feel about things, perfectly fine, and everybody is, all across the spectrum. So.
It seems like those two men had a problem with a confident woman.
Well, and that's exactly it. And I think that's kind of what Lou was alluding to, what he was getting at, that, there's often a friction between the way, some people want to see women and women included, and the way other women want to be seen themselves. And, that, to me, the latter is what's important, because the only way that I could understand anything about myself was letting this spectrum of desire play out. And I'm just the messenger. Okay, so I think we went through the Paris book pretty completely. Yeah, I think we did.
Okay, do you want us to try the video now, Renee?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can, Michael. There is some additional work. I mean, it is a lot of this work, the Paris work, the Polaroid work. There is some additional work in there. So I guess if we can make it work,
okay.
that'd be nice.
Okay, Tatum. Yep.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, and if any of you have questions, about the work as it's coming through, or, other things, feel free.
I've seen this a few times where there's this, people talk about a photograph being sexual. And in a lot of cases, it's just, maybe it's frontal, but it's just a photograph of a person. And I'm kind of wondering about what is it that makes it sexual?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, do you see it as sexual or do you see it as something else?
I don't mind if it's sexual. I view it as liberating. Yeah, I don't balk at the description of sexual. I just, there's something to me, that word just isn't sort of big enough, I think, to encompass a lot of what was being shared with me.
Right, right.
Just that freedom is just, it was really important for me to be given this level of trust and access to these women and what they wanted to say was just a real privilege. And just, it's entirely selfish because so much of it was about trying to understand, all the things that I missed in my 20s and my 30s.
There's a quote from Sally Mann said that some people find shoes sexual.
Yeah, that's true. And I interviewed Karis Wilson a few years before she died. She was Weston's wife and muse. Right. And she maintained that Weston was not trying to say anything sexual with the Peppers and the other non-nude, non-female stuff, but and O'Keeffe apparently said the same thing about her work. But we can't control how others see it. We can't control, we can only control whether or not we're being faithful to what the people we're photographing or painting, or if we're being faithful to how they want to present themselves.
You have a photograph in the presentation in your Polaroids of a woman holding a champagne bottle, and there's a hand from below coming up and covering her crotch. And I'd love to know the story of that picture, because I think it's a fantastic image.
Thank you. You may be the only person that's ever asked about that image, and it's one of my absolute favorites. That actually was in Paris, not in the Polaroids book. And those two women, it was the first time that I'd met them, and they've become incredibly good friends. They're cabaret dancers that have worked together for years and years and years. And like so many of these things, they sort of happen organically. There is champagne, there's nudity, and there's a lot of joy and silliness. And I think we were trying actually with this second edition of the book to get more of that feeling. I love that image. It was in that same Paris loft. And we, the three of us spent probably solid like 3-4 days together, just running around Paris, shooting, outside, shooting in the loft. And they were incredible. They were just, and these were women that were used to really being seen, being seen. They were cabaret dancers. They perform, not to the level of sort of Crazy Horse and Moulin Rouge, but just sort of one or two steps below that, and very, very public facing with their bodies. And so to sort of just let that loose a little more authentically was just a blast. It was the first and only time that I've gotten to spend that kind of time with them. I've seen them since in different settings. One of them models for me occasionally for workshops. But it was just one of those, and we talk about it, every once in a while. There are a couple of catchphrases and things that happen during our couple of days together, and one or the other of the three of us will just write one sentence, and and the rest, the other two of us will sort of laugh for about a week from it. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny because it looks like a photo that's been planned and is spontaneous at the same time. I really, really love that shot.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's sort of yeah, and that fits that photo. It also sort of brings up. Let me see here if I can find this really quickly. The comment that I pulled from the introduction to put on Instagram the other day. I'll indulge me and I'll read this. So Gregory Forstner, the French painter. Renee Jacobs knows that one never thinks alone and that eroticism does not exist without participation. It does not matter if the sequences were scripted upstream. The important thing, like a shot in a movie, is that a singular form of truth of the sensation explodes into the viewer's consciousness like an epidermal reaction, an experience from which one should not emerge unchanged. So part of what I love about what Greg, I think, is saying there is even if there was some inkling beforehand that we might do this or we might do the other thing, it's less important than sort of what happens when the water is added to the chemical powder thing, and it just goes like that. So there is some forethought sometimes, but excuse me, invariably it's about the light and it's about the playfulness of whoever I'm photographing. Oh, Michael, you're muted.
No.
Oh.
Anybody else have anything for Renee?
Well, just to say that beautiful work. I really enjoy looking at your work and enjoy this this presentation today.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Ditto.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks everyone for joining.
Both books.
Thank you, Renee. Appreciate it.
Both
Thanks,
books are
Robert.
available for pre-order on Renee's website. The Southeast Center website has a link, or go directly to Gallery Vauvet, which, if you are not familiar with all their publications, are just gorgeous. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Come visit
Thanks,
us.
Renee.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Michael. Thanks, Michael.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
And Dan,
Thank
if
you.
you're still there, yes.